This is The Listening Tube.
This is the first edition of The Listening Tube. I'm your host, Bob Woodley. Now, you might be thinking, who are you and why did you get a talk show? Well, we might talk about the second half of that question later, but as for the first part, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I was born in Cole Township, Pennsylvania. I grew up in a family of iron workers and coal miners. I graduated from Shamokin Area High School in 1980 when I began my broadcasting career at WISL in Shamokin in 1979. So I was working in radio before I even got out of high school. I served in the United States Air Force as a radio and television broadcaster, where I worked as a disc jockey, news and sportscaster, and program host. I've spent my whole life in the media, working in radio, television, and newspapers across the country and around the world. I'm a registered independent, a centrist. I have no loyalty to any political party, so I'm free to criticize the lunatic fringe on either side of the political spectrum. And I will. But that's enough about me for now. Let's talk about the Listening Tube. First of all, the Listening Tube works in both directions. You can call and leave your comment, questions, and answers 24 hours a day at area code 570-601-1101. For as long as you listen to me, I'll listen to you. Secondly, this is partly an opinion show and partly a factual show. I'll try to let you know which is which. I'm going to talk about politics, topical subjects, history, and yes, we'll talk about racism, prejudice, and bigotry. I'm willing to walk through that minefield because I'm not afraid of being canceled. But let's get this straight right off the bat. I'm not here to offend anyone. My goal, if I even have an agenda, is to bring some common sense to the subjects of the day. I want to give you the confidence to hold on to your beliefs. I want to expose social media propaganda, as well as scams and other ways you may be volunteering valuable information. This program will evolve over time, and I hope that you'll be a part of that evolution. The Listening Tube will air every Sunday morning during the 10 o'clock hour on WWPA, WMLP, and on TwinValleysTalk.com, and can also be downloaded as a podcast that you can access at any time. Thank you for putting your ear to the Listening Tube. I'm your host, Bob Woodley. And now, not the headlines. 5 people died in the U.S. last year, the highest in a decade of, you'll never guess, rabies. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recently reported 5 people died of rabies in the U.S. last year, the highest number in a decade. The CDC released a report on 3 of them, all the result of contact with bats, and said their deaths could have been prevented. My wife and I once woke up to 3 bats flying around. Talk about an action-packed night in the bedroom, I can tell you. Anyway, one of the people who died was an 80-year-old Illinois man who refused to take the shots after exposure that could have saved his life because of a fear of vaccines. Now, it's sad that this man passed away, especially considering he grew up in the age of vaccines. He probably had vaccines in elementary school or high school or in the military. I know I've had vaccines in all of those scenarios myself. But to die because you're afraid to take the vaccine doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially since we know the vaccines work. Otherwise, we wouldn't still have Ozzy Osbourne. Look, he turned out perfectly normal. An Idaho man and a Texas boy didn't get the shots because they didn't believe a bat bite or scratch had broken their skin. So no Band-Aid, no problem. I guess that didn't work out. That's unfortunate. One of the two other deaths was a Minnesota man bitten by a bat who got the shots, but they weren't effective because of an undiagnosed immune system problem. And the last guy, he was bitten by a dog in the Philippines, who then came back to the United States and then died. Rabies is usually fatal, but it can be prevented through a series of 5 shots given within 2 weeks of exposure. So, if you think you're exposed to rabies, go ahead and get the shots. Now, I'm not talking about the COVID vaccine here. I have 2 things to say about the COVID vaccine. 1, don't be bullied into getting the COVID vaccine. And 2, don't be bullied into not getting the COVID vaccine. And that's all I have to say about that.
The Listening Tube.
Politics are making Americans feel sick. Our politics have gotten so toxic that they're making us feel sick. That's according to a new study. The University of Nebraska researcher, Professor Kevin Smith, says that 4 in 10 people, that's 40%, I did the math for you, cited politics as a top stressor in their lives. And many say it causes them to lose sleep, causes fatigue, leads to feelings of anger and loss of temper, hurts their relationships, and triggers compulsive behaviors. He found that 1 in 20, 5%, you're welcome, even said thinking about or discussing politics leaves them feeling suicidal. Just thinking about it. The findings come from a survey of Americans conducted 2 weeks before the 2020 election and 2 weeks after the 2020 election, and the results mirrored an earlier survey carried out in 2017. Smith, the professor, said it's unpleasant to think that in that span of time, nothing changed. A huge chunk of American adults genuinely perceive politics is exacting a serious toll on their social, their psychological, and even their physical health. Those most likely to be affected this way tend to be younger, lean Democratic, show more interest in politics, and actively engage in more political causes. However, those who were more politically knowledgeable were less likely to be negatively affected. So, what is this really telling us? I think it says that young liberals take politics too seriously. Is politics a serious subject? Yes, if you're a politician. Otherwise, there's not much you can do to change anything politically in between elections. For most Americans, the ballot box is the only way to affect change, and that change comes slowly in most cases. Just as the wheels of justice turn slowly, so do the tank treads of politics. But young liberals who show a greater interest in politics and actively engage in political causes don't seem to recognize the snail's pace of politics. The younger generations are used to instant results. They don't have to deal with busy signals when they call someone. They don't have to wait for the record store to open to get the latest hit single. So I can understand why, when they passionately apply themselves to a political cause and don't get immediate results, they feel aggravated and cheated. Plus, don't forget, These young people are the same generation that got participation trophies. So they expect a reward regardless of the effort. Although, the most revealing part of the study, in my opinion, is that those who were more politically knowledgeable were less likely to be negatively affected. That would indicate that the people who are getting sick because of their political stance haven't educated themselves enough to know better, or haven't been educated by their school system enough to know better. And by know better, I mean that they've probably been fed a line of socialist propaganda by their college professors about what American society should be instead of what it is. They've been taught that our country is a mess, which it isn't, and that only their activism will save the day, and it won't. Maybe it's not politics that's making them sick. Maybe it's the realization that they've been hoodwinked by liberal teachers and professors and media into believing that the fate of the world rests upon their shoulders. That's a big responsibility for a young person who doesn't yet know that the only real power they have is on election day. Volunteering for political causes is admirable, and Americans are the best at volunteering anywhere in the world. But if politics is making you sick, put your effort somewhere else, for your own good and ultimately, the good of your community.
If you missed part of the show or would like to hear it again, find the Listening Tube podcast where you get your podcasts.
The pandemic opened the door for virtual learning in pre-secondary education. Parents suddenly had a window into what their children were being taught. Then along came something called critical race theory, which was quickly followed by the mantra, educate, don't indoctrinate. Educate, don't indoctrinate. So, you don't want your children's school curriculum to be indoctrination. That's a worthy goal, I suppose, but I got news for you. Schools have been a place of indoctrination since anybody hearing this has been alive. I first realized it in 10th grade when studying philosophy. We were talking about isms, and the definition of ism being policy of. And there are a lot of isms: Catholicism, capitalism, Judaism, communism, socialism. Well, we were talking about communism, to be specific, and the living conditions in what was at that time the Soviet Union, and how the people weren't free to do the same things we were free to do here. I raised my hand and asked the teacher why the people there don't know there's a better way. He told us that in the Soviet Union, they're taught in school that communism was the best form of government, that it is the most perfect form of government. I replied, in my infinite wisdom, that I was glad we don't do that here in America. With that, he snapped his heels together and stood at attention, put his hand on his heart, and began to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. He didn't recite the whole thing, but he made his point. It was at that moment I realized that I was being indoctrinated every single school day since my first day of kindergarten. If you went to school in America, you were indoctrinated too, in more ways than one. Why do you think students start each day with the Pledge of Allegiance? Schools are the perfect place to indoctrinate our children. Schools were, in fact, developed as a way to indoctrinate more than as a vehicle for education. Prior to the 1840s, all schools were religion-based. According to a 1998 essay by Robert P. Murphy, prior to 1830, Catholic and Protestant schools competed for students. They knew that schools were the perfect tool to spread religion. Local government would sometimes supply minimal funds for the schools, but the concept of a public school hadn't been thought of by any Western nation. So the origin of schools began with a way to indoctrinate children on the virtues of religion. It wasn't until the 1840s that there became a distinction between public and private schools, and the end of using public resources to fund Catholic schools. That in itself was a result of an influx of Irish Catholic immigration, which Protestants found threatening. The prevailing thought at the time was that Catholics are loyal to the Pope, and that there had never been a Christian government anywhere in the world. However, this country was founded on freedom of religion, and there was a great tolerance for religion. So by creating a public school, the government could control the spread of a specific religion. But as time would tell, the public schools were still teaching Christianity, albeit Protestantism, which led to the establishment of the Catholic parochial system in 1874. Using public schools to indoctrinate children was created on this continent. So what started as a place for religious indoctrination became a place for government indoctrination. Local business leaders held sway on the curriculum, needing people with just enough education to work in the factories and pass on the owner's beliefs to their children. And because education, and I use that word loosely here, was controlled locally, as it mostly is today, children in different geographical areas were taught not only different things, but the same things in different ways. Children in Georgia were, and perhaps still are, taught that the northern states started the Civil War, while people north of the Mason-Dixon line were, and still are, taught that Abraham Lincoln was one of our greatest presidents. When you say, "I want my children to be educated, not indoctrinated," you're plain out of luck. Schools have always been places of indoctrination. That indoctrination varies by year, school district, political changes to our society, and many other variables, some of which we can't control. There are some variables that can be controlled, though. Those are the decisions made by your local school board. There's been a lot of controversy lately about who should be making the decisions about what children learn in school. While the children think they've already learned enough, should the parents have the final say, or should the school board? Well, the school board is elected to make those decisions. So should the school board be made up of parents or educators? That's up to the voters to decide. That's where the phrase, "all politics is local," begins, with your school board. But the bottom line is, if you want control over what kids are taught in school, then you have to vote for the people who share your beliefs. The question isn't whether or not children are indoctrinated in school. The question is, what kind of indoctrination do you want them to get? Because just like news networks, school board members have an agenda. I recently saw a statement from the principal of a local high school that said the school is committed to embracing diversity and equity. I support diversity, but I was interested in exactly how one embraces equity. So I sent an email to the principal. I never got a reply, and now the statement has disappeared from the website. What might have happened there? I don't know, but it's important to understand that all schools are places of indoctrination. Public schools, private schools, religious schools, they all have an agenda. And if you homeschool your child, you have an agenda too. I'm not saying your agenda is wrong. I'm not saying any individual agenda is wrong. But if you demand that your local school educates and doesn't indoctrinate, you might want to look back and try to pinpoint when you were indoctrinated. Thanks to the late Mr. Bartle in 10th grade, I was able to realize that I had been conditioned to support my country of origin by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance every morning for the duration of my public education. Am I upset about that? No, because I've been to other countries, met people from even more other countries. Yes, some have freedoms that we don't have here. We're not perfect. But I'm an American by birth, and American by indoctrination, and an American by choice. I love America. Ironically, it's only through education that we can make informed choices about what we want to believe. It's only through education that we can get a better grasp of all the variables that have to be taken into account to make choices about how to live our lives. Part of the price of that education is indoctrination. The right education will enable you to distinguish one from the other.
Let's go back through the listening tube.
This week in 1984, the Supreme Court ruled 5-4 that individuals at home could record television shows to watch later. The lawsuit, which was actually against the Sony Corporation, was brought by movie companies, including Universal Studios and the Walt Disney Company. They sued Sony for creating the Betamax VTR system, which we now know as a VCR. Sony's beta format eventually lost out to the rival VHS format, but Sony's Betamax was the first commercially available device for home recording of television video. There were high hopes for the master beta format, but by then technology had moved on. By the way, Sony Corporation is now one of those giant movie producers who may have sued itself had they invented the Betamax today. Since then, duplicating copyrighted material has become commonplace. We all record shows we may or may not watch at a later date, programs that caught our interest at one point but never sparked the same interest later, so the show languishes in our recorded file, perhaps never to be watched at all. Eventually deleted as our playlist grows to an unmaintainable volume. Nearly 40 years later, Disney Plus is one of the country's most popular streaming services. Between 1984 and about a year ago, Disney decided that they would just record every program, movie, television show, and animated short they ever created and make it available to you 24 hours a day. Universal Studios is doing whatever they can to keep up with Disney, even building theme parks in the same general vicinity as Disney, and creating the same type of media accessibility. Two of the same media companies that fought against you being able to make a copy of one of their programs so that you could watch it later are now two of the same companies that will record it for you and let you play it back whenever you want. The same thing happened in the music recording industry with the advent of magnetic recording tape, used in cassettes and 8-tracks back in the 1970s. Then came the computer age and writable CDs. Mixtapes entered the digital age with streaming playlists. The topic of whether or not you may copy something to consume later was an issue so important in the 1980s that it led all the way to the United States Supreme Court. It wasn't an easy decision. Justice John Paul Stevens used his responsibility to write the dissenting opinion in a way as to sway enough of his colleagues to change their minds. Ultimately, the justices ruled that it was okay to record a television program so that you could watch it later. 8 years earlier, I Write the Songs by Barry Manilow hit #1 on the record charts. Barry Manilow wrote so many popular songs that it's hard to even categorize him in any way other than as a monumental songwriter. Barry Manilow even wrote songs that we didn't know were songs, like the jingle for Dr. Pepper, I'm Stuck on Band-Aid, Like a Good Neighbor, and more. When I Write the Songs hit #1 on the charts, it only seemed fair. He did write the songs. Only, he didn't write I Write the Songs. I Write the Songs was written by Bruce Johnson of the Beach Boys. In fact, Barry Manilow wasn't even the first to record it. The Captain and Tennille were. So, as it turns out, there's a lot of money to be made by copying something and making it available to the masses. So, if you feel compelled to copy this program and send it to everyone you know, I guess there's just nothing I can do about it.
The listening tube works in both directions. Call 570-601-1101 to leave a message. All messages are subject to airing and editing. You can call the listening tube 24 hours a day at area code 570-601-1101.
A recent scam I've seen on social media is one that says, "You died and went to heaven. Your seat number is the month and day of your firstborn. What seat are you in?" Now, by the time these things get to me, they already have thousands of replies. All kinds of number combinations that people volunteer because they want to believe they're going to heaven. And now they'll, in some symbolic way, reserve a seat there. Maybe your best friend had a baby the day after you, so now you'll get to sit next to each other in heaven. It's such a comforting thought. So you and your friends share the month and date of your firstborn, even though you and your friends all know each other's kids' birthdays. You post it on social media as a way to connect with the rest of the world today and in the afterlife. What you're really doing is giving away vital information about you, your family, and important dates that you might be using as a password somewhere or everywhere. Sure, it may seem insignificant to you, but to a scammer or identity thief, it's a piece of a puzzle that they spend all of their time working on. They've already solved enough puzzles to live off of, and now they just spend all night gathering tidbits of information about as many people as time will permit. I know a lot of media tries to scare you, but that's not what I'm doing here. This is a caution. These information-gathering memes are written a certain way for a purpose. Think for a moment before you share anything with numbers or names. You could be providing a piece of the puzzle that ultimately makes you a victim. Another one I've seen is, how old would you be if your age was reversed? Now, this is a fun one because it lets you use your imagination. Let's say you're 72. If you reverse the digits, you're 27. Oh, to be 27 again. You were something else when you were 27. Virile and taut at the beginning of the prime of your life. You just didn't know it yet. What great memories to have, and how nice it is to recall it, and how it might be to be 27 again. On the other hand, what if you are 27 and your age in reverse is 72? That's also fun, because then you can imagine what it might be like to be jamming to Justin Bieber, walking slowly down the sidewalk with a cane, telling people to get off your lawn. Now, if your age is a single digit, or two of the same digit, it doesn't change anything. If your age is triple digits, then reversing them would create an age range of biblical proportions. It's fun to think about, and fun to answer. Thousands of other people did. Well, this is just a simple way to find out what year you were born, which is also likely to be used in some sort of password combination. Not just your age, but your kid's age, your parents' age, the year you graduated, and yes, I realize I said the year I graduated in the introduction to the program, and a whole host of other number combinations associated with you in a chronological way. Again, it's just another piece of the giant puzzle that is your online DNA. Scammers gather information like a whale gathers krill.
It's time for 10-word answer. Here's the question.
What do you think of the show? Call 570-601-1101 to leave your 10-word answer. What do you think of the show? Every day, millions of kids in schools across the country pledge their allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. The original version was first recited by school children October 12, 1892, to commemorate the 400th anniversary of the voyage of Christopher Columbus. 12 million children participated. It was written earlier that year by Francis Bellamy. But this isn't about the Pledge of Allegiance. This is about the flag. After the terrorist attacks in 2001, American flags went up all over America. Front porches in neighborhoods everywhere were suddenly adorned with the American flag as a symbol of solidarity with the rest of America, an America that was stunned like we hadn't been since the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Flying the American flag was how Americans showed our support for our troops, our government system, our way of life. Since then, the number of American flags on display has diminished somewhat, although the Stars and Stripes still flies on many front porches across America. My wife and I sometimes display the American flag from our front porch, interspersed with other flags we use to recognize different times of the year like holidays and changing seasons. Many people display flags of their favorite sports teams or words of encouragement, and that's all fine and well. It's an opportunity to let your neighbors and passers-by know how you feel or in what you believe. For some people, it's important that others know that the people who live in this house like puppies. You can tell by the puppy flag. Flags of all types can now be found at all kinds of stores and markets. They're very popular. And new designs are being developed every day as the thirst for people to fly their own flag as we are encouraged to focus on what makes us unique as individuals. We're told to be proud of our heritage, sexual orientation, occupation. There are flags to display your support for police and firefighters, for gay people, for political beliefs, for the military department in which you may have served. Whatever sets you apart from other people or consolidates you with other people. Here's the problem, and you've probably seen some of the flags supporting police and firefighters with a black and white version of the American flag, with one of the stripes being colored blue or the original red. There are now different versions of the American flag that incorporate designs meant to support not only police and firefighters, but gay rights, military service, and a variety of other lifestyles and causes. There's an American flag that has the words, "Thank you, healthcare workers," written on it. There's an American flag with different colored stripes meant to honor first responders that has words like corrections, EMS, dispatch, etc. written on the stripes. There's an African American flag with black and red stripes and black stars on a field of green. In addition to the blue and red line flags, there are thin gold line flags to honor Gold Star families, and thin pink line flags to honor, well, I don't know what the thin pink line flag is meant to honor. These bastardizations of the American flag are flagrant violations of the U.S. Code, which says, the flag should never have placed upon it, nor on any part of it, nor attached to it any mark, insignia, letter, word, figure, design, picture, or drawing of any nature. When you display a variation of the American flag to show your support for something, anything, you're showing your disrespect for the original design, which is the flag of our nation, the symbol of our republic. When you display a variation of the American flag, you disrespect the heroes at Iwo Jima. You disrespect the men who landed on the moon. These bastardizations of the American flag are yet another symptom of our divisiveness. When we have to modify the American flag to meet our own values, we've lost our American values. Sure, supporting the police or firefighters is worthy. Showing your pride in something you are or support is often admirable. These faux American flags, flags that incorporate the design of the American flag but then are embellished with lesser symbols, are created to make you feel good about your cause. They're designed to make you associate patriotism with the cause they display. What they're actually doing is diluting the symbol of our country. By diluting what the American flag represents, you dilute what it means to be an American. If we all have our own versions of the American flag, we don't have an American flag at all. Don't get me wrong, you're welcome to support any cause, occupation, lifestyle, or political affiliation you wish. If you wish to display your individualism or your connection to others, be it through a sports team or a military service, be it through homosexuality or heterosexuality, whatever flag you want to fly is fine with me. But allow me to remind you that whatever flag you want to fly, it's a lesser flag next to the American flag. To embellish the American flag to incorporate your own agenda is un-American. If you want to fly your own flag, fly it all you want. But the first thing you need to do is get your own flag. The American flag represents all of us, not just your special interest group. The Listening Tube is written and produced by yours truly. Copyright 2022. Thank you for putting your ear to the Listening Tube. I'm Bob Woodley for Thou ad Infinitum.